Rodney writes fiction while working full-time in law enforcement, and the way he structures his writing process is honestly one of the most practical systems I've heard of. Let's see how he does it. What is your writing process?
So it's been evolving over the I guess 3.5 years now too. I forget to add that extra year. So the first book, I was a sergeant. I was working afternoons. My daughter was younger, and I had all morning to work. Like I could get up in the morning, and I had time to work on things and kind of come up with ideas and kind of go through that. And I keep saying I got promoted, and it's pretty much ruined my life, especially creatively. But like you said, my daughter is almost 12 years old. She plays multiple sports, so we're constantly going to that. And my wife actually wants to spend time as like this family unit or something like that. And now I work during the day. And again, I have a more important administrative position where, I'm stressed out and I'm burnt at the end of the day because there's so much going on at work. I'm being brought into meetings. There's no downtime really. So it's been a lot more difficult lately. So, but my basic writing process was I came up with the idea and I needed to learn how to write.
This is the part that every working creative needs to hear. Rodney doesn't wait for perfect conditions. He builds a process around real life.
And I went back to my college books and I looked at The Hero's Journey. I looked at Story by Robert McKee. I did all the things you're supposed to do. I looked at everything and I'm like, all right, how am I going to structure this? So I started figuring out, my different archetypes and, where we're going into the unknown, kind of crossing the threshold and coming out with all the stuff. And I'm like, this isn't working for me. So I went to YouTube and to podcasts and I listened to a bunch of different book coaches and other creative people talk about their process. And I found a podcast episode all about Save the Cat. And that saved my bacon because that was it's how my brain works. I needed to be able to plot it in a certain way, and having the idea of the story beats and having places to go to, like it for me it gave the story direction.
When he mentions Save the Cat, watch how his whole process snaps into place. This is the moment he stops wanting to write and starts writing novels.
So the first book I mapped out a lot. Like I knew when things were going to happen, how they were going to happen, where I was going to reveal certain things, and how it was going to end. So I had all that mapped out. Second book, I was fortunate enough to be able to start the second book before the first book came out. So with that one, I still plotted things, and I knew where I wanted the major things. I knew where my opening scene was going to be. I knew my inciting incident, my midpoint, my lowest point, my climax. I knew where those were all going to be and a general idea of what was going to happen. But I needed to write to get to those parts. So I kind of, in the writing community, you have plotters and pantsers. So on that one, I kind of plantsed a little bit. Like I plotted to certain points, but other parts I was like, all right, well, I need to get to that. This is the saggy middle. How can I make this exciting? But I know where I'm going. So I knew all the things I needed to set up ahead of time. And then when I got there, I was like, okay, well, let me go back and fix that. And then with this third book, it's been a bigger struggle because I had ideas, and knowing that I have to wrap everything up, being a trilogy, I have a long list of things that I need to pay off. Things that I owe the reader, checks I wrote, 2.5 years ago or 3.5 years ago for the readers, and I need to pay them all off. So it's a lot harder, again, with a lot less time.
This is such a reliable evolution. Book 1 is tightly plotted, Book 2 is more intuitive, and Book 3 is a beast because he owes readers payoffs. I kind of think that's one of the funnest things about it too, though, is you paint yourself into a corner and then you have to figure out how to step over it, and sometimes that drives some really fun creativity, but it usually creates a little brain damage at the same time.
Yeah, one of the things that I have to my advantage with my situation is I have a 45-minute commute back and forth to work. And typically I listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and things like that. But there's also times when I'm stuck. Like I usually try to get up in the morning and I write before I leave to go to work now. And there's times I like to try to leave myself with something more to say. Like I'll write to, and then she opened the door. What is she going to find? I don't know. Or maybe if I have an
That's a good
idea,
tool. I've used that before too, yeah.
I'm not gonna write that part. I'm gonna let it kind of, simmer. Let the meat rest a little bit and see what's gonna happen. But I'll talk it out on the way to work. I'm like, okay, well, this could happen, and what's naturally gonna happen. So I'm a big, if you ever drive past me in my car, I'm usually talking to myself because I got to hear it and kind of get it out and kind of but sometimes the best ideas come. I have a presentation, inspiration that comes in the night. That first idea came out of nowhere and just got popped in there. So sometimes, I'll be sleeping or be tossing and turning and I'll be like, oh yeah, let's do it that way. and then I'm excited to get up and write because I'm like, I know how this is going to go now.
I think you'd be a great cop for me to pass on the freeway just because you'd be stuck in your story and you wouldn't be looking at your radar. I love this part because it's the truth. Creativity often comes from the corners we accidentally paint ourselves into. That's cool, though. I completely agree with that. I think that's one of the things that, like I've said, I've used some of those tools before, too, to help flesh out some of my moments where I'm not really sure where it's going. It's kind of like if you're sitting down and you're writing every single minute, it gets hard because you're not always in that flow state. Sometimes you are, but I think that an important part about writing for a lot of people is that downtime, that time to just let your imagination wander. And so those times when you're commuting, you're still a writer. You're still engaged in the act of storytelling, but your subconscious and your conscience are kind of working together to puzzle it all out. And I think that's an important step that maybe a lot of people tend to forget.
Well, I think it's hard when, I'm all about discipline and sitting down and saying, this is my writing time.
Right.
And the second book, I also got a huge head start on because I was scheduled to go to a writing conference in Florida last September when the hurricanes hit. So when those hurricanes hit, they ended up canceling the conference. So now I had time off from work and time already scheduled away from my family. So I was like, I'll just cancel everything. And then the more I sat there and thought about it, I'm like, you have the time. We actually have a cabin up in the Catskills. So I was like, well, what if I just go up there for 3 days and just write? And, called my wife and I'm like, do you mind if I do this? She goes, no, we were already planning on you being away. And I didn't even think about work. I was like, I already have the time off, so let's not even broach that. So I went up and, I turned it into two things. I turned it into a marketing thing for, Facebook. I was doing like live videos, like, here I am, I'm writing, I swear, but I also got a ton of work done because I just had dedicated time. But I found I really work well in sprints. I sit down and I say, they could be as short as 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, or they could be, hey, I'm going to write for an hour. But when that hour is up, I'm going to get up, I'm going to move around, I'm going to do something else to kind of, break that up a little bit. When I'm writing at home, I have an electronic drum set sitting, about a foot away from me. So I'll write. My alarm goes off, my 20 minutes is up. I'm going to hop on there and move around and kind of get the blood flowing, work up a little bit of a sweat, get some music, get a beat in my head, and kind of forget about what I'm working on for a little bit. So I kind of have, when I do have, a couple hours to actually dedicate to writing, I'll do that. And it's kind of, that's kind of my personal process, my personal flow when I'm actually writing. And I find I get a lot of success because, you're focused for that amount of time and then you're forgetting about it for a little bit and giving yourself a little time off.
If you've ever felt guilty for not writing at the keyboard, Rodney gives you permission here. Thinking is writing. His sprint method is brilliant. Focus, break, reset. It's how you keep momentum without burning out. Do you ever find that your writing and just kind of the work on that does it ever interfere with your job, or does your job ever interfere with the writing in a way that you just want to scream and punch something or something like that? I mean, I know you said that lately it's been harder to do because of the course of things. But how's that work? Just trying to balance those two.
So it's been a learning process, especially since I got promoted in July. Just the increased amount of responsibility I have at work it drains me, and I think that's coupled with the fact that now that I've released 2 books, I'm open about it too. I think that's another important thing too, is tell people you're doing these things. So when I go to work, I have a bunch of fans. Yes, I work in a sheriff's office, so we have a bunch of women who work in our civil division that are all big. They're all big readers. They're all women, probably. I think we have a couple of younger, mid-20s to mid-50s, and they're all big readers. And when I said that I was writing a book, they all bought it, and they read the first book and they read the second book. So I actually go to work and I talk about my writing a lot more, in kind of past tense. And I'm also kind of getting a little bit of pressure, like, hey, when's that 3rd book coming? What's going to happen? We want to know. And so it's a weird dichotomy with that. But as for like creativity while I'm working, I never really wrote, other than the original idea that came to me. I never really did work at work. I mean, did writing at work. And I'm not just saying that because in case the sheriff's listening, but he's actually very supportive too. Like anytime he introduces me to people, he's like, "Oh, and Rodney's a writer." I'm like, "Thanks, Sheriff. I'm going to give you some books. Can you just say, like, hey, Rodney's a writer. Buy a book, I'll donate to
and give it a review."
Yeah, exactly, and I'll donate to your campaign. But so my job's been very supportive. I actually have a coworker who's also a horror author. He's had a ton of success as an independent artist himself, and so we kind of we'll compare notes. And he's probably 4 or 5 years ahead of me in the process. So I'll ask him, hey, this like I recently started working on my first audiobook and having to hire a narrator and everything. So I kind of again, business end of things.
This is where you see how supportive environments matter. Even in law enforcement, Rodney found unexpected fans. Rodney's process is a reminder that creativity isn't magic, it's discipline, structure, and willingness to adapt. But it's also one other thing. It shows that you can be full-time in a career while writing full-time. Because while you're doing your career, you're thinking, you're internalizing, you're still putting those stories together. And then when you actually sit down to write, when your day job is done, the whole day's worth of thoughts just flow into that, and you're able to create something that might have taken you the full day to do had you not been thinking about it all day. Now remember, this was just a short piece of our interview. If you want to catch the whole thing, jump on over to the podcast. Link is in the description below, and so is a link to Rodney's book.